My name is Wallace Greer. I am 67 years old, and I buried my wife of 41 years on a Tuesday in October. The morning was cold and gray, the kind of cold that settles into your bones and refuses to leave. I remember standing at the grave while the pastor read from the 23rd Psalm, and I thought, this is the loneliest sound in the world. A man's name being mentioned in the same sentence as the word beloved. Her name was Carol Ann. She had been a school librarian for 32 years. She loved hydrangeas and strong tea and old mystery novels, the paperback kind with the creased spines. She was 64 years old, and she died of what 3 different doctors called progressive cardiac deterioration. They said it like it was weather, like it was inevitable. Like 64 was just the age some women's hearts gave out. I didn't question it, not once, not until the drive back from the cemetery. My daughter, Suzanne, was in the front seat next to her husband, Brent. I was in the back the way children sit. Suzanne was doing the talking. She always did the talking, telling me about the reception at the house, who was bringing what, who needed to be thanked. Her voice had that particular tone she'd adopted over the last several months. Organized, efficient, slightly impatient. I used to think it was grief, the way some people go cold when they don't know how to cry. I told myself she was handling things in her own way. Then Brent spoke. He thought I couldn't hear him over the rain on the windshield. "Did you reach the guy from Sherwood?" he said. Low, careful. Suzanne didn't turn her head. Not yet, Thursday. It needs to be before the will reading. I know, Brent. The listing can't sit. If it gets listed before he agrees to the trust transfer, it complicates everything. Listing, trust transfer. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass of the window and said absolutely nothing. My wife of 41 years was barely underground, and my son-in-law was talking about listing dates. I am a retired postal worker. I worked a mail route in Fairfield County, Connecticut for 34 years. I don't have an MBA. I never learned to read a balance sheet. But I spent 3 decades reading addresses, noticing which houses got which kinds of mail, catching the small details that most people miss. You learn that kind of attention without even trying. I noticed things. I noticed the way Suzanne had started arriving unannounced 6 months ago, right when Carol Ann first got sick. How she had inserted herself into every doctor's appointment. How she'd taken over managing Carol Ann's medications, organizing them into those weekly pill containers, setting the alarms on her phone. "You've got enough to worry about, Daddy. Let me handle this." I'd been grateful. I'd been so grateful. I noticed how every time I asked about our savings, the joint account, the CDs we'd built up over 40 years, Suzanne always had an explanation. The advisor moved firms. "The statements are going paperless now. I'll print them for you, Daddy. Don't worry." I hadn't worried. I trusted her. She was my daughter. At the reception, I sat in my own armchair and shook hands and said, "Thank you," and accepted casseroles, and I smiled when I was supposed to smile. Suzanne moved through the room like a manager doing inventory. Brent stood near the hallway and checked his phone. At 4:15, while someone's cousin was telling me a story about Carol Ann from 30 years ago that I already knew by heart, my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. Unknown number. I let it go. It buzzed again and again. I stepped into the hallway and answered. "Mr. Greer?" A woman's voice, measured, professional. "This is Dr. Phyllis Okafor. I was your wife's physician at Fairfield Internal Medicine. I'm so sorry for your loss. I know this is an awful time to reach you." I knew the name. Carol Ann had switched to her about 8 months ago. The previous doctor, the one we'd used for years, had retired. I'd only met Dr. Okafor once, in the parking lot outside the office. "Thank you," I said. "Mr. Greer, I need to ask you to do something that's going to seem very strange. I need you to come to my office. Not tomorrow, tonight, if possible, or first thing tomorrow morning." A pause. "And I need you to come alone. Please don't mention this call to your daughter." The hallway suddenly felt very small. "Why?" I said. She didn't hesitate. "Because I found something in your wife's file that I am required by law to report, and before I do, I believe you have the right to know what it is first. Your wife, she left instructions. About you, about your safety." Another pause, quieter. "Mr. Greer, I don't believe Carol Ann's death was from natural causes." I stood in the hallway of my own home for a long time after she hung up. The murmur of the reception floated around the corner. Someone laughed. I heard Suzanne's voice, crisp and directing. I went back to the armchair and I sat down, and I smiled at the cousin, and I said all the right things for another 2 hours. When the last guest left, Suzanne handed me a large manila folder. "We don't have to do this tonight," she said, in that soft voice she used when she had already decided we were doing something tonight. "But the attorney's window is tight. It's just the estate management paperwork, Daddy. So you don't have to stress about the accounts and the house and all of it. We'll handle everything." She opened the folder on the coffee table. Blue tabs marked where I was supposed to sign. "What exactly is this?" I asked. "It's a revocable living trust." Brent sat down across from me, his forearms on his knees, his voice patient the way someone is patient when they've rehearsed it. "It just consolidates the assets, the house, the accounts, into a single structure. Makes probate much simpler. Your mom actually discussed it with Suzanne before she passed." My wife had discussed it, without telling me. "I'd like to read it first," I said. Suzanne smiled. "Of course, but the attorney needs it back by Friday, so—" "I'll read it tonight," I said. "I'll let you know." Something moved across Suzanne's face. It was quick, like a shadow crossing a wall. Then it was gone and she was smiling again. "Get some rest, Daddy. We'll talk in the morning." After they left, I locked both locks on the front door. I stood in the kitchen and looked at the coffee maker. The one Carol Ann had used every single morning for 11 years. The one she'd stopped using when she got too weak to stand at the counter for more than a few minutes. The one Suzanne had started using instead. "I make it just the way Mom likes it, Daddy. Here, sit down." I set the folder on the kitchen table and I opened it. I read every page. It took me 2 hours. Legal language is designed to put people like me to sleep, but I had 34 years of reading fine print on certified mail forms, and I understood enough. It wasn't a revocable living trust. It was an irrevocable trust. I had to read the word 3 times. Irrevocable, meaning once I signed, I could not undo it. The document transferred full controlling interest in all assets, the house, both bank accounts, my pension, Carol Ann's life insurance policy, to a trust administered solely by Suzanne. I would be listed as a beneficiary, meaning I could live in the house at her discretion. At her discretion. There was a provision for residential transition if the trustee determined the property was no longer suitable for the beneficiary's care needs. I was the beneficiary, my house, my home of 39 years. I sat at that table until midnight. I thought about the way Carol Ann had looked in those final weeks, the weight she'd lost, how her hands shook, how she'd said to me once quietly, almost to herself, "Wallace, I feel strange. Not sick strange. Wrong strange." I'd told her it was the medication, that it was her body adjusting. I'd believed that completely. At midnight, I called a cab. I told the driver a street address near Fairfield Internal Medicine, and I sat in the back and watched the dark streets go by, and I thought about my wife and how I hadn't protected her, and I pressed my fist against my mouth the whole ride so I wouldn't make a sound. Dr. Phyllis Okafor's office was on the 2nd floor of a small medical building. The lobby was empty at this hour, but she'd left word with the cleaning staff that I was coming. She met me at the elevator. She was a compact woman in her 50s, natural hair going silver at the temples, reading glasses pushed up on her head. She looked like someone who had not slept much either. She led me back to her office, diplomas on the wall, stacks of folders, a small lamp casting yellow light over everything. She closed the door. "I appreciate you coming," she said. "I know what today was." "Tell me," I said. I didn't sit down. I couldn't. She opened a file on her desk. "When Carol Ann first came to me 8 months ago, she told me she'd been experiencing fatigue, hand tremors, hair thinning, and intermittent confusion. She attributed it to stress and aging. I ran a standard panel." She paused. "The results were abnormal. I wanted to do a deeper toxicology screening," she agreed. "What did you find?" She looked at me steadily. "Elevated barium levels, and traces of a compound consistent with chronic low-dose thallium exposure." I didn't know what thallium was. She could see that. "It's a heavy metal," she said gently. "Historically used in rat poison. Before it was banned for consumer use, it's still obtainable. And in small, consistent doses over a period of months." She stopped. "It presents as neurological decline, Fatigue, tremors, hair loss. It mimics a dozen legitimate conditions. It is very, very difficult to detect, unless you are specifically looking for it. The room was very quiet. You're telling me someone poisoned my wife. I'm telling you her blood work showed compounds that should not be in a healthy body, and that have no environmental explanation. I'm telling you I reported it to the state medical board 8 weeks ago, and that an investigation is pending. She looked down at the file. And I'm telling you that Carol Ann knew. I finally sat down. She came back in, about 6 weeks before she passed, Dr. Okafor said. She was weaker. She told me she had figured out the most likely source. She took a breath. She told me it was the vitamin supplements, the ones her daughter had been buying for her, and for you. My supplements. The big orange bottle Suzanne had brought over months ago. I read that CoQ10 is really good for heart health at your age, Daddy. Just take one with breakfast. The ones I'd been taking every single morning. I looked at my own hands. She told me something else, Dr. Okafor said. She said she couldn't go to the police directly. Her son-in-law, Brent, she said he had a connection at the Fairfield PD, a former college roommate who was now a detective. She was terrified a report would be buried or flagged before it got to anyone who would act on it. She met my eyes. She asked me to hold the report, to wait until after she was gone. She said, the doctor's voice caught, just slightly. She said, if I report it now, they'll know I know, and Wallace will be next, and he won't even see it coming. She reached into the file and produced an envelope. My name was written on the front in Carol Ann's handwriting, careful, deliberate, the way she wrote when her hands were steady enough. She left this with me, Dr. Okafor said. She told me, if she died, give it to you, and make sure you were alone when you read it. I held the envelope for a long time before I opened it. Her handwriting inside was shakier than the envelope. It was 1 page. I won't repeat all of it here. But she told me she loved me. She told me she was sorry she hadn't found a way to warn me sooner without tipping them off. She told me to look at the bank statements. The real ones, not the ones Suzanne had been printing for me. She told me to check the supplement bottles. She told me she had already spoken to Dr. Okafor, and that there was a trail. And then she wrote, Wallace, you were never a clueless man. Don't let them make you into one now. Do not sign anything. Do not drink anything Suzanne brings you. I folded the letter and put it in my breast pocket against my heart, and I did not cry. I was past crying by then. Dr. Okafor had already contacted a state-level investigator, someone outside the local department. She introduced me to him that night, by phone. His name was Del Fortner, a senior investigator with the Connecticut Department of Public Health's Criminal Referral Unit. He had a voice like gravel and a manner like a man who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. He told me what he needed. We have the medical evidence, he said. What we need is the source. We need to tie the compound to a specific product in a specific person's possession. The supplements are the key, but we need them fresh, unopened, or partially used, and we need chain of custody. He paused. That means someone has to get them. I drove back to my own house at 2 in the morning. There were lights on over the garage. Suzanne and Brent were staying in the guest suite up there, the one I'd finished for Carol Ann's mother years ago. Rest her soul. They were watching me. I understood that now. They hadn't left me alone out of concern. They'd stayed to make sure I didn't wander somewhere inconvenient. I went in through the back door. I went straight to the kitchen cabinet, where Suzanne had organized our supplements into a neat little row. 4 bottles. I photographed them with my phone, the way Del had instructed. Then I put them in a paper bag, and I put the bag inside my old postal service duffel, the one that still had my last name stenciled on the side. I spent the rest of that night sitting in the dark, in my armchair. In the morning, Suzanne came down with coffee and that soft smile and the folder. Did you get some sleep? She asked. A little, I said. Suzanne, I want to talk about these documents. She sat across from me, hands folded, patient, practiced. I've been thinking, I said, making my voice slow and tired, not hard to do. You and your mother were close. She must have talked to you about her wishes. Suzanne's expression was very warm. She wanted us to take care of you, Daddy. That's all this is. I know, I said. I know she did. I want to understand it. Can you walk me through it? The accounts, the house, all of it? I want to hear it from you." And so she talked. For 40 minutes she talked. She explained the trust structure, the asset consolidation, the transition provision, framing everything as protection, as love, as Carol Ann's final gift to me. Brent nodded along and occasionally added a number, and I listened to every word with the phone in my breast pocket, the voice memo app running. When she finished, I nodded slowly. "I think I understand," I said. "I need one more day. Just one. You know how your mother always said I needed a night to sleep on anything important?" Suzanne's jaw tightened, just for a second. Then she smiled. "Of course, Daddy." That afternoon, Del Fortner's team arrived in a cable company van. I left with Suzanne and Brent to pick up groceries. I insisted, told them I needed air, needed to feel normal, and I needed Suzanne's help picking out something for dinner. She couldn't say no, not without dropping the mask. While we were gone, Del's people went through the house. When we came back, everything looked exactly the same. Except it wasn't. That evening, Suzanne made dinner. She set the table the way Carol Ann would have. She lit candles. It was a performance of family. I sat at the head of the table where I had sat for 39 years, and I ate and I talked about the old days, about Carol Ann, about memories. Suzanne cried on cue. Brent put his hand over hers. After dinner, Suzanne brought 2 mugs of chamomile tea. She set one in front of me. "Mom always said chamomile helped you sleep," she said softly. I looked at the mug. I looked at my daughter's face, her careful eyes, her gentle mouth, the performance of love she'd been giving me for 6 months. "Thank you," I said. I wrapped both hands around it. I let the steam rise. I did not drink it. Del had told me not to drink anything. I hadn't prepared myself. At 9 o'clock, I told them I was turning in early. I went upstairs. I poured the tea down the bathroom sink. The next morning, I came downstairs and I told them I was ready to sign. Suzanne's whole body relaxed. It was the most honest thing I'd seen from her in months. She put the folder on the kitchen table. She uncapped a pen and held it out to me. I sat down. I looked at the signature line. Then I looked up at my daughter. "Your mother knew," I said. My voice was quiet, completely calm. Suzanne blinked. "Knew what, Daddy?" "What you were putting in the supplements." I set the pen down. She knew for months. She documented it. She told the doctor. She left a letter. I reached into my shirt pocket and placed Carol Ann's letter on the table between us. She wrote it by hand because her hands were shaking, because you made them shake. The color left Suzanne's face. "I don't, Daddy, that's not." "The state investigator has the bottles," I said. "The ones from the cabinet. He has Carol Ann's blood work. He has the recording of this conversation and the one yesterday, where you explained exactly how the trust transfers everything to you." I folded my hands on the table. "And in about 30 seconds, the front door is going to open." Brent stood up so fast his chair fell backward. It didn't matter. There was nowhere to go. The door opened. 2 plainclothes investigators in the hallway, 2 more coming through the back. Del Fortner walked in last, unhurried, a man with no reason to rush. Suzanne was saying something. I don't know what, a denial, an explanation, her voice climbing and fracturing. She kept saying she'd done it for me, that she'd been worried about us, that it wasn't what it looked like. Brent said nothing at all. He sat back down in his chair with his hands on the table, and he stared at the wall, and he didn't look at me once. They were both in custody before 10 o'clock. I stood in the doorway of my own house and watched the cars pull away, and I thought about Carol Ann in those last months, sitting at this table with shaking hands, saying she felt wrong strange. I thought about how she'd kept it from me, not because she didn't trust me, but because she knew I would have gone straight at Suzanne and given everything away. She'd known me for 41 years. She knew exactly how I worked. She had protected me the only way she could, quietly, methodically, the way she'd done everything. The trial was 7 months later. The lab results confirmed thallium acetate in the supplement bottles, the same compound found in Carol Ann's blood work, in concentrations consistent with 6 months of low-dose exposure. The same compound was found in trace amounts in the chamomile tea Suzanne had made me the night before the arrest. The recording from the kitchen covered the rest. Suzanne's attorney argued coercion. She said Brent had masterminded everything, that she'd been afraid of him, that she hadn't understood what she was putting in the bottles. Brent's attorney said she'd found the thallium herself, ordered it herself, administered it herself, and had wanted to sell the house and move to Phoenix for years. Neither story was true. Both of them were right about each other. The jury took 4 hours. Guilty on both counts. First-degree murder of Carol Ann Greer. Guilty on one count of attempted murder of Wallace Greer. The judge sentenced them each to life without parole. He said something before he read the sentence. He said that the crime had been made worse, not better, by the way it had been constructed, the patience of it, the tenderness of it, the way it had used love as a mechanism. He said he had been on the bench for 22 years, and this case would stay with him. I was sitting in the 3rd row when they led Suzanne out. She turned and looked back at me, just once. I don't know what she was hoping to see. I kept my face still. I didn't give her anything. Carol Ann's doctor walked out with me afterward. We stood on the courthouse steps in the November cold, and neither of us said anything for a while. She was very brave, Dr. Okafor said finally. She was the bravest person I ever knew, I said. And I knew her for 41 years, so I have some data to work with. The doctor smiled. I think it was the first time I'd made anyone smile in 8 months. I drove home. I walked into the kitchen. I filled the kettle myself, the way I'd done every morning for 4 decades before my daughter arrived, with her bottles and her careful concern. I made a pot of coffee, dark roast, the kind Carol Ann always bought. I sat down at the kitchen table. The hydrangeas in the backyard were dead for winter. In the spring, they'd come back. They always did. I drank my coffee, and I was still alive, and the house was quiet, and I thought about how Carol Ann, right up until the end, had been doing exactly what she'd done for 41 years, looking out for me, making sure I'd be all right. She always did make a better plan than I ever could.